Hogwarts White Lord Chapter 146 to 154. If Hermione became the Minister of Magic, it would mean that Ivan effectively controlled the entirety of England. He would have legitimate authority and the backing of a righteous cause. England's international status in the wizarding world is exceptionally high. As the base camp of the Western European wizarding community, candidates nominated by the British Ministry of Magic are naturally very competitive. Once Ivan was elected as the supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, the entire wizarding world would shift according to his will. Those who opposed him, the stubborn elements, or those who lost their vested interests. In the future, they would all share one title: losers. You know about my club. Would you like to join us, Professor? Ivan extended an olive branch to Snape. He didn't expect to gain Snape's allegiance immediately. Ivan simply made it clear that he valued Snape's abilities and was open to recruiting him. It must be acknowledged, Snape was an exceptional talent in the original timeline. Voldemort sought him out, and Dumbledore recruited him as well. If not for his deep involvement with Harry and his role as a double agent, Snape might never have met such a tragic end. Are you kidding? What do you think? Ivan lowered his hand. He wasn't offended by Snape's refusal. It was natural for someone to harbor doubts, especially about someone as young as Ivan. Besides, Snape's devotion to Lily and his protective instincts toward Harry were well known. The Ministry of Magic will arrive soon. Ivan stood up, walking toward the door with his hands clasped behind his back. As he reached the doorway, he turned and looked at Snape, who still seemed puzzled. Professor, do you want to come with me? What? Prophecy magic, you know. I can see the future. Ivan said, pointing at his eyes and then gesturing toward the window. In about half an hour, officials from the Ministry of Magic will arrive at Hogwarts to invite Dumbledore to a meeting. You haven't been exposed, have you? Well. Ivan shrugged nonchalantly. Who knows? But I think the Ministry of Magic is likely just coming to speak with the headmaster. The Path of the Fire God spell was too closely tied to Dumbledore. Moody knew this magic. However, Ivan believed Moody would never betray Dumbledore. If Moody wanted to confirm the truth, he would likely approach Dumbledore in private. That said, Moody wasn't the only one who had witnessed POTFG. If the Ministry of Magic employed certain investigative spells, uncovering the truth was only a matter of time. What are you planning to do? Snape asked, his voice carrying both curiosity and unease. The Ministry of Magic was on their way, yet Ivan, the person most likely responsible for the commotion, seemed completely unbothered. In fact, he seemed eager to invite him. Snape has never seen such a bold and arrogant dark wizard. Yes, a dark wizard. Even if he is still young, Ivan now gives Snape the same feeling as a dark wizard who ignores the law. Of course, it doesn't mean that dark wizards are bad people. Snape himself is a dark wizard. The so-called dark wizards and white wizards are actually two types of people in the magic world, and there is no difference between the two. Maybe in the eyes of muggles, dark wizards are very evil. But in the eyes of wizards, the black market is similar to professions such as forensic doctors and gravekeepers. People will avoid risks and be afraid, but they will not think that they should not exist. Dark wizards are not criminals, they are just wizards who study dark magic, that's all. Or that is what Snape thinks. Let's go, Professor, Ivan said casually, already heading toward the 7th floor. Snape followed quickly, intending to warn Ivan not to provoke the Ministry of Magic. But as he trailed behind, he couldn't help but worry, not about Ivan, but about the Ministry itself. Would they even be able to handle him? By the way, who should be afraid here? This little monster. Snape thought to himself, both frustrated and awed. He couldn't comprehend why such an impossibly powerful little wizard existed. Can an archmage evolve even further? What is that? Is it more powerful than Dumbledore and Voldemort combined? Ivan? On the way, Ivan encountered Professor McGonagall. When the stern professor saw Snape accompanying him, she hesitated for a moment before directing her attention toward Ivan. She had a good idea of what Ivan might have done the day before. This morning, when McGonagall saw the headlines in the Daily Prophet, she had been nearly scared to death. Are you okay? McGonagall, unlike others, understood Ivan's nature. He wasn't like Voldemort, reckless and malevolent. Whatever his reasons for invading Gringotts, McGonagall believed he must have had a valid purpose. Moreover, Ivan had exercised restraint throughout the incident. That alone was enough to reassure her to some extent. For the cursed gold coins from before, Ivan said, his tone softer and more respectful toward McGonagall than it had been with Snape. Ivan truly respected Professor McGonagall, viewing her as an elder akin to Dumbledore. Snape, on the other hand, did not occupy such a place in Ivan's heart. To Ivan, Snape was more like an exceptionally skilled manager, someone to be recruited as a capable subordinate. By contrast, Ivan had never considered treating McGonagall or Flitwick as followers. His vision for them was different. McGonagall and Flitwick were better suited to remain at Hogwarts, where their talents as educators would continue to inspire new generations of wizards. As for Ivan, his goal was clear: to succeed Dumbledore as the next headmaster of Hogwarts when the time came. Additionally, when considering the issue of qualifications, Ivan thought it best for Professor McGonagall to succeed Dumbledore as the next headmaster. He could wait another decade or so, until he was about 24 or 25 years old, before officially stepping into the role himself. Cursed gold coins? Yes, they're items from the Ambrosius family. Professor McGonagall's expression grew tense. So, I destroyed them, Ivan stated simply. Both McGonagall and Snape froze for a moment before quickly processing what Ivan had just said. Just as you might suspect, they were dangerous, Ivan continued. As the heir of the Ambrosius family, I have an obligation to destroy them. But, directly invading Gringotts? McGonagall said hesitantly. Professor, do you really think the goblins would willingly return what they've claimed as theirs? Ivan asked, raising an eyebrow. His words left both professors momentarily speechless. It was true. Everyone in the wizarding world was well aware of the goblins' insatiable greed. Even treasures legally stored by wizards at Gringotts were sometimes eyed covetously by the goblins, let alone artifacts that the goblins considered part of their own hoard. Not even the Ministry of Magic, and certainly not Fudge, could force the goblins to relinquish something they had already claimed. The Ministry of Magic won't risk straining relations with the goblins just because of my demands, Ivan said matter-of-factly. In that case, my only option was to take matters into my own hands. Even Snape, usually skeptical, found it difficult to argue with Ivan's reasoning. As for McGonagall, the stern professor let out a long sigh of relief. At least Ivan hadn't done this for selfish or malicious reasons. He had acted to destroy dangerous magical items. You should remain cautious for now and avoid exposing yourself, McGonagall advised. I'll do what I can to ensure they don't discover the truth. McGonagall advised. I'll do what I can to ensure they don't discover the truth. Thanks, Professor, but I have something to tell you. 5 minutes later. What are you talking about? Snape was baffled. To him, Ivan's words were no different from openly slapping the Ministry of Magic in the face. Especially after cursing Fudge and Umbridge, turning them into toads. For that reason alone, the Ministry of Magic would not let Ivan off easily. And now, Ivan was planning to expose himself. Yes, expose himself. According to Ivan, he intended to inform the Ministry of Magic that he had retrieved the soul coffin of the Ambrosius family and destroyed it. This sounded reasonable on the surface. But the problem was that Ivan would essentially be admitting to being a criminal. Then what? How would it end? It seemed like Ivan was determined to give the Ministry of Magic no face at all. How to deal with the Ministry of Magic, leave it to me and young Ivan. Dumbledore suddenly appeared and spoke calmly. Now, I think everyone should congratulate this child first. He may have just become the most powerful wizard in the entire wizarding world. McGonagall and Snape stared at Dumbledore, utterly bewildered. They felt as though the words, from caring for Ivan to Ivan becoming the most powerful wizard in the entire world, had shifted so rapidly that they couldn't keep up with the conversation. Albus, I don't understand what you mean. Are you saying this boy wasn't joking with me just now? McGonagall was utterly confused, while Snape, on the other side, recalled what Ivan had told him, that he had broken through and entered a higher realm. Is there really a higher realm, more powerful than the Archmage? What? McGonagall was stunned and quickly asked. Ivan has surpassed an Archmage, is there a realm above the Archmage? McGonagall could understand each word on its own, but when combined, it felt as though she had skipped several chapters of a book, missing a crucial part of the story. The Archmage is the realm of wizards who have undergone magical transformation and achieved a qualitative change in their magic. Young Ivan, and Tom, Voldemort, were originally at this level. But not long ago, perhaps just last night. Ha ha ha, Dumbledore spoke with great pride, gently stroking Ivan's hair as if he were a proud parent celebrating their child being admitted to the most prestigious magical institution. Last night, this child successfully crossed that barrier and reached a height that no one has attained in nearly 100 years. As for this realm, due to its rarity and the historical gap in understanding, the magical world had no proper name for it. If one had to give it a description, it would be something akin to wielding the power of gods while remaining mortal. In fact, the creator of the Deathly Hallows, the death that the three brothers met, was likely a wizard who had reached this very realm. He left his legacy in the form of the three Deathly Hallows. Only wizards who uncover their secrets can find a path to such transcendent magic through the power of death. In addition, Ivan is fundamentally different from wizards who reach the demigod level through the 12 orthodox paths. His magic power of 6 was obtained by adding points. In other words, Ivan's magic power of 6 has no fixed attributes. This means Ivan possesses magic power with no attributes and, simultaneously, all attributes, a perfect and limitless state. The difference between this and other demigod wizards is unknown to Ivan because he has not yet encountered another wizard at this level. He simply has a feeling. That is, his magic power of 6, like his earlier magic power of 5 and thinking attribute of 3, represents an all-encompassing enhancement. It feels like listening to a myth. Snape had intended to refute Dumbledore's words, as was his habit. But the mention of the legend of the Grim Reaper, especially the existence of the Resurrection Stone, silenced him. If what Dumbledore and Ivan claimed was false, it would mean the legend of the death was false, and the Resurrection Stone did not exist. And if that were true, Snape would never see Lily again. For this reason, Snape did not refute the conversation, contrary to his usual behavior. He desperately hoped what the two said was true. That there really was a death. That the Resurrection Stone existed. That it could bring back the woman he loved. Isn't this too flattering? Ivan, using passive Legilimens, caught Snape's thoughts word for word. Theoretically, as a master of occlumency, Snape's mind should have been impenetrable. However, the thought of the Resurrection Stone and thoughts of Lily made his emotions surge violently. Such emotional turbulence could not escape Ivan's notice. It's better not to hear it, Ivan thought, completely speechless about Snape. It truly felt like the tragic story of a childhood sweetheart who could not resist a gift from heaven, a man who loved so deeply and unconditionally that he ended up with nothing. In fact, the simplest way to win over Snape would have been to resurrect Lily. But Ivan could not do that, even if he possessed the power to bring someone back to life. Life and death are governed by natural laws, and forcibly breaking them might not necessarily lead to good outcomes. The issue here wasn't about morality but the potential side effects. Magic is a power rooted in the mind. With sufficient magic power and the correct methods, resurrecting the dead, much like manipulating time and space, would be within Ivan's reach. There is no inherent good or bad in such actions, only the consequences. However, bringing back someone who was meant to die could profoundly disrupt people's worldviews and values. Resurrecting the dead was not a trivial matter, and it could never be made public. Most importantly, Ivan had no control over the magic of death. The forces associated with death were far more dangerous than those tied to life. If he were careless, Ivan himself might end up as nothing more than a pile of dry bones. Wait, McGonagall said, rubbing her temples as she tried to process everything. She did understand what Dumbledore and Ivan were explaining. But understanding didn't make it any less overwhelming. A god-level wizard? That title seemed far too exaggerated. Ivan was so young, so small, and yet he was supposedly even more powerful than Dumbledore, possibly on par with the legendary gods themselves. McGonagall suddenly felt that the world was changing too quickly, and she couldn't keep up with the pace. Actually, there's no real difference, Ivan said, explaining the concept of the world strings and greater magic to the three professors. After listening, the three of them displayed different reactions. Snape was shocked and struggled to accept what he had just heard. Although Professor McGonagall was also surprised, her reaction leaned more toward excitement. As for Dumbledore, he seemed as though he had known it all along, his trademark smile never leaving his face. This is the source of confidence for the headmaster and me, Ivan continued. To be honest, the power we possess has far surpassed that of the Ministry of Magic. Now, it's not us who should be worried, it's them who should be afraid. At this point, Ivan added, I don't have any intention of being an enemy of the Ministry of Magic. I much prefer the current peace and tranquility over a chaotic wizarding world. Of course, Ivan thought to himself, when he eventually becomes the supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, things will be different. By then, Ivan figured he would have enjoyed more than a decade of peace. So this unchanging wizarding world should also change its appearance after that. McGonagall and Snape were not from the same era as Dumbledore. If Grindelwald were here, he would undoubtedly see the shadow of a young Dumbledore in Ivan. More aggressive, more arrogant. He's like this, and you really don't care. Snape looked at Dumbledore, wanting to say that he had trained another Dark Lord. However, Dumbledore simply shrugged helplessly, he truly had no choice. Not to mention that he hadn't wanted to fight Ivan before, now, he couldn't win against him, so there was even less room for action. They're coming. At that moment, McGonagall suddenly reminded them. The three of them turned their eyes toward the fireplace in the headmaster's office, where a burst of green flames rose, and several figures stepped out one after another. Leading them was the head of the Auror office, Scrimgeour. Accompanying him were Moody, Kingsley, and Dawlish. The three of them immediately took out their wands to clean the dust off their robes. Oh, you really should renovate the fireplace. Every time I come here, I get covered in dust, Moody grumbled, familiar enough with Dumbledore to voice his complaints openly. But when he turned around, he noticed that there were other people present in the headmaster's office besides Dumbledore. Snape and Minerva. Moody greeted Professor McGonagall and Snape. He knew both of them well and was quite familiar with them. Only Ivan was not very familiar to Moody. However, when Moody observed Ivan, the latter raised his head and smiled calmly at him. For some reason, Moody felt that Ivan looked familiar. But no matter how hard he thought about it, he couldn't recall where he might have seen the young wizard before. Have we met before? Moody limped forward, putting his face directly in front of Ivan. His magical eye spun continuously, as if trying to see through him. Oh, here we go again, Dawlish said with a sigh, clearly exasperated by Moody's suspicious nature. He stepped forward and introduced Ivan, saying, "This is Professor Dumbledore's favorite student, Ivan Ambrosius. He came to the ministry with him last time." Even though Dawlish explained, Moody still stared intently at Ivan. Of course, now he knew who the boy in front of him, truly, was. But precisely because he knew, it made him even more suspicious. Dumbledore's fire spell, there weren't many people in the world capable of casting it. As Dumbledore's favored student, Ivan learning and mastering such a spell wasn't an impossibility. The most critical point, though, was this. Moody noticed that since he had arrived, Ivan had remained exceptionally calm, as though he had already known they would come. As for the issue of magic power, that was indeed a point of doubt. How could someone so young possibly possess such immense magic power? The wizard at Gringotts, his strength was truly exaggerated. If that individual's identity was indeed Ivan, it would be nothing short of terrifying. Moody couldn't fathom how someone so young could wield such overwhelming power. What was even more alarming was the thought of how much stronger Ivan might become if he continued to grow unchecked. Alistair. This time, Kingsley and Scrimgeour also noticed something unusual. Mad Eye, don't scare the child, Scrimgeour said, stepping forward to intervene. He knew Moody's tendency to be overly suspicious, treating everyone as if they had something to hide. But Ivan was just a student at Hogwarts, a little wizard. There was no way he could have any motive to commit any crime. Moreover, they had come here with a more important purpose in mind. No. Moody took a step back, creating some distance between himself and Ivan. A sly smile spread across his face. You can hide it from others, but you can't hide it from me, Moody said. It's you, isn't it? That person, it's you. What? Scrimgeour and Dawlish looked utterly confused, their eyes darting between Moody and Ivan. Only Kingsley seemed to understand Moody's implication. Slowly, he drew his wand and pointed it at Ivan. What are you doing? McGonagall stepped forward, placing herself directly in front of Ivan. Professor McGonagall was visibly tense. She had never expected Ivan's identity to be exposed so quickly. However, considering Moody's renowned abilities, it wasn't entirely surprising. His magical detection skills were legendary in the wizarding world, perhaps even rivaling Dumbledore's. Professor. Ivan was touched by McGonagall's instinct to shield him, but he wasn't one to hide behind someone else. He had made his choices, and there was no point in avoiding the consequences after all. He gave McGonagall a reassuring glance and gently stepped past her. First meeting. No, this should actually be our second, Ivan replied, his tone calm and composed. Gone was the imposing figure from Gringotts, standing before them was a polite, unassuming boy with a scholarly air. Let me introduce myself, Ivan continued. My name is Ivan Ambrosius. Ambrosius. The moment Moody heard the surname, his expression shifted. The Eternal Family. A descendant of Merlin. Suddenly, Moody's gaze sharpened, and he turned to Dumbledore, his face a mix of disbelief and realization. This kid. He's an archmage. What? Having already grasped the difference between archmages and ordinary wizards after the events at Gringotts, Scrimgeour and Kingsley were stunned. But compared to what Moody had just revealed, their prior shock seemed trivial. Are you serious? Scrimgeour frowned, looking back at Moody. Such a little guy, an archmage. Scrimgeour and Kingsley exchanged glances, their disbelief mirrored in each other's eyes. Dawlish, however, couldn't contain himself and shouted, Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. How old is he? And an archmage? Dawlish scoffed, visibly agitated. You must be crazy, Moody. Hey. Moody ignored Dawlish's outburst, his magic eye swiveling back to Ivan with renewed interest. Albus, Moody asked Dumbledore, did you know about him? Ah, well, what do you mean, exactly? Dumbledore deflected Moody's question with a knowing smile, his usual cryptic demeanor making it clear he wasn't about to give a straight answer. Boy, you're very strong. Truly remarkable. Moody turned his attention back to Ivan, a hint of begrudging respect in his gruff tone. But you shouldn't have broken into Gringotts without permission. That kind of move puts you squarely on the opposite side of the Ministry of Magic, and that's not rational at all. Despite his words of caution, Moody's stance was notably less confrontational. After realizing Ivan's true strength, it was clear that being an enemy of such a young and powerful wizard was not a wise move. As for Dawlish and Scrimgeour, it was just a matter of a forgetfulness memory charm. There were two archmages present, and any one of them could knock Dawlish and Scrimgeour down in an instant. Add another memory charm to ensure that they can return to the Ministry of Magic with peace of mind. As for Kingsley, he is a member of the Order of the Phoenix and an absolutely loyal person to Dumbledore, so he doesn't need to be hit by the memory charm. Scrimgeour was still grasping the situation. Ivan couldn't help but wonder, are these people really Aurors representing justice, or just some second-year defense against the dark arts professors? You. Scrimgeour's worldview seemed to have been completely upended, but with Moody's subtle reminder, he quickly connected the dots between Ivan and the dark wizard from Gringotts. The same commanding temperament, the same confidence in his demeanor. Although the physical appearance was different, the aura was nearly identical. This realization hit hard. It was clear Ivan had never intended to hide himself. He was openly standing there, face to face with the Ministry of Magic officials. Arrogance, it was the only word that came to mind. Mr. Director, would you like to stay here with me? Ivan smiled calmly at Scrimgeour. As everyone watched, the wand in Scrimgeour's hand suddenly began to disintegrate. Without warning, it turned to ash and dissipated into the air, right before their eyes. My wand. Scrimgeour's pupils trembled as he stared at the remains in his palm, his expression one of sheer disbelief. How did you do that? Destroying a wand was one thing, but to reduce it to nothingness, without any visible spell, chant, or gesture, was beyond comprehension. Exaggeration could not capture the reactions of the Aurors present, nor those of Snape and McGonagall. Ivan's move had completely overturned their understanding of magic. Don't be nervous, Mr. Scrimgeour. Ivan spoke calmly, waving his hand. The ashes from Scrimgeour's wand began to condense between his fingers. In the next moment, the wand reformed, as if time itself had rewound. See, it's perfectly fine now. Ivan casually played with Scrimgeour's wand, weighing it in his hand for a moment before handing it back to him. Scrimgeour stood there, stunned. Almost mechanically, he took the wand from Ivan. At this moment, the director of the Auror office fully understood that he was no match for Ivan. No, it wasn't just him. There wasn't anyone in the entire British Ministry of Magic who could rival Ivan. And the potential consequences of opposing someone with such overwhelming power were simply unimaginable. Remember what I told you before. Ivan's voice broke through the stunned silence. It's foolish to let a big-mouthed fool, obsessed with power and self-interest, serve as the Minister of Magic. The root of Ivan's conflict with the Ministry of Magic ultimately boiled down to his actions against Fudge and Umbridge. As for Gringotts and goblins, these are actually not the responsibility of the Ministry of Magic, they are purely the goblins' own problems. Even if Scrimgeour had a strong sense of justice, he couldn't justify standing up for the goblins and risking bringing a powerful enemy like Ivan to the British wizarding world. No matter how foolish someone might be, such an action would be unthinkable. That Fudge and Umbridge, huh? Moody scoffed disdainfully. Those ignorant fools don't care about the difference in strength between the two sides. In their eyes, Ivan is out of control, someone who has humiliated them and damaged the authority of the Ministry of Magic. Such people only saw Ivan as a threat, someone who needed to be dealt with immediately, even sent to Azkaban. But shouting to send him to Azkaban when Ivan was leaving Gringotts. Scrimgeour, Moody, and Kingsley never seriously entertained the idea. Not then and not now. Ivan was far too strong and far too exceptional. If he continued to grow, the British wizarding world would reach the pinnacle of magical power, rivaling the glory of Merlin's era. To eliminate Ivan now would be to sever their own future. Subtly, a shift occurred. Moody and Kingsley began to take positions, not against Ivan, but against Scrimgeour and Dawlish. On the other side, Dawlish, still confused, struggled to comprehend what was happening. Scrimgeour had no fear. The head of the Auror office just stood there quietly, looking at Ivan. What do you want to do? Scrimgeour, a strict and righteous man, was not afraid of death. If Ivan truly was the second Voldemort, Scrimgeour would not hesitate to strike, even at the cost of his own life. I've said it before, and I'll say it again now. Ivan glanced at Dumbledore, who gave a slight nod to indicate his support. I plan to follow the rules of the game in the wizarding world, rather than relying on my strength like Voldemort and flipping the table whenever I please. You're willing to abide by the law? Scrimgeour asked, narrowing his eyes. That depends. Ivan's reply made Scrimgeour tense, his heart racing. If the rules are fair, I will respect them and not break them. But if someone acts unreasonably, then they can't blame me for responding in kind. Ivan's answer, while unsettling, reassured Scrimgeour to some extent. As long as Ivan didn't kill indiscriminately, Scrimgeour could find ways to work with him. Regarding the Gringotts incident and the curses on Fudge and Umbridge, these matters could be interpreted in different ways, depending on the perspective. The key was the lack of fatalities. Throughout the entire event, Ivan hadn't killed anyone. While Fudge, Umbridge, and the Aurors had indeed been humiliated, they couldn't deny that Ivan had simply been far more skilled. In the end, there wasn't much they could say. According to him, what Ivan did, to put it bluntly, was the result of youthful impulsiveness, causing some people to lose face. If one were to evaluate the actual harm caused, it was nearly negligible. The goblins only lost the soul chest and the cursed gold coins within it. According to Ivan, these were part of the Ambrosius inheritance and rightfully belonged to him. Ivan's reasoning was sound. The goblins, notorious for their greed, would never willingly return anything they had acquired, no matter how rightful the claim. In such a scenario, the use of force seemed like the only viable option. All right, Scrimgeour finally said, raising his wand. But this time, it wasn't directed at Ivan. Instead, the wand was aimed at Dawlish, who had been standing frozen in shock since the truth about Ivan's identity was revealed. And it wasn't just Scrimgeour. Both Moody and Kingsley also turned their wands, pointing them at Dawlish. The sight of 3 wands suddenly aimed at him sent Dawlish into a panic. Wait a minute. Dawlish finally snapped out of his daze, the realization of what was happening overwhelming him. Why are they pointing at me? Dawlish didn't understand the situation at all. He stared at the 3 wands pointed at him, bewildered and alarmed. Can anyone explain to me what's going on? Without hesitation, Dawlish tossed his own wand aside and raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. It's time to make a choice, Mr. Dawlish, Ivan said, stepping forward before the others could respond. The boy's expression was calm, his smile almost innocent, but his words were enough to send a chill down Dawlish's spine. Will you side with Fudge or with me? What? Dawlish's first instinct was to scoff. He wanted to retort that Ivan was just a boy, a child unqualified to make such demands. But the reality was undeniable, right in front of him. Ivan was too powerful. A single breath from him could turn a wand to ashes. A flick of his finger could reshape matter itself. Even someone as dense as Dawlish could recognize the magnitude of Ivan's abilities. Wait. Dawlish raised his hands and exclaimed loudly, desperate to save himself. Don't use the Oblivion charm on me. I'm not on Fudge's side. Moody and Kingsley exchanged glances, both looking slightly exasperated. Still, if Dawlish was willing to switch allegiances, there was no need to resort to the Oblivion charm. Of course, the final decision rested with Ivan. You won't regret your choice today, Mr. Dawlish, Ivan said calmly. Ivan had no intention of holding grudges over minor issues. As long as those who chose to surrender weren't inherently evil, he was willing to let them join him. Then, Professor, I'm old, and my legs aren't what they used to be, Dumbledore said with a smile. Dumbledore could have easily diffused the tension just now. However, the old headmaster chose to be lazy, leaving the matter in Ivan's hands and acting as if he were already enjoying a peaceful retirement. In a few words, Ivan had turned all the Aurors present to his side. There was no helping it. Ivan was simply too capable. Dumbledore had initially believed it would take at least 4 or 5 years for Ivan to reach his full potential. But no one could have predicted Ivan's meteoric rise, not only surpassing Dumbledore himself but also displaying the same kind of ambition that Dumbledore and Grindelwald had shared in their youth. If Ivan weren't so young, Dumbledore might have let him venture out to explore on his own. Yes, you're old, Ivan said with a light shake of his head. He glanced at Moody and the others before shifting his focus to McGonagall and Snape. I'll go with you. Hearing that Ivan intended to go to the Ministry of Magic to lift the curse on Fudge and Umbridge, McGonagall quickly followed his footsteps. Professor McGonagall was deeply concerned about Ivan, not about his strength but rather his approach. She hoped he would exercise restraint and handle matters more tactfully. What identity are you planning to use when you go to the Ministry of Magic? Snape posed the question, drawing the attention of Moody, Kingsley, Dawlish, and Scrimgeour, who all turned to look at Ivan. Although Ivan now possessed the power to potentially take control of the entire Ministry of Magic, McGonagall's concern was valid. Ivan was far too young. To become the Minister of Magic, strength alone wasn't enough. Reputation was also critical. The idea of a 12-year-old leading the British wizarding world was simply unrealistic. If such a thing were to happen, the British magic world would undoubtedly become a laughingstock among wizards worldwide. They'd mock Britain for being so bereft of capable wizards that they had to put a child in charge. Ivan said with a sly smile. I believe that, with Fudge and Umbridge's lack of perception, they won't associate me with the Dark Wizard from Gringotts. Moody had managed to piece it together primarily because Ivan hadn't attempted to conceal his identity. However, even with speculation based on temperament and image, it required a wealth of knowledge and experience to connect the dots. As for Fudge and Umbridge, even if they had 2 more brains between them, they would never be able to uncover Ivan's true identity. You say that as if Fudge is a fool, Scrimgeour said, though he and Dawlish couldn't find a way to refute Ivan's words. After all, Ivan was correct, Fudge lacked experience in magic. Now I am the genius wizard of Hogwarts, Ivan Ambrosius, Ivan declared confidently. He had been to the Ministry of Magic once before, and the wizards there were already aware that Hogwarts had produced a genius said to appear only once in 1,000 years. Helping again this time was part of Ivan's strategy to build his reputation. If Ivan could break the curse that no one in the entire Ministry of Magic had been able to handle, it would greatly elevate his status. Boom. The next moment, with a burst of green flames, the group stepped out of the flow network and into the Grand Hall of the Ministry of Magic. This being his second visit, Ivan was calm and composed. Following the two professors, with Moody and Scrimgeour leading the way, Ivan observed the hustle and bustle around him. Dawlish and Kingsley moved quickly to summon Aurors to maintain order. The group soon arrived at the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, specifically the subdivision specializing in breaking curses. Barty Crouch Sr., Amelia Bones, Sinix, and Arthur Weasley were all present, waiting for Dumbledore's arrival. Everyone's eyes darted around, searching for the headmaster, yet he was nowhere to be found. Amelia stepped forward, her familiarity with McGonagall allowing her to speak openly. "You're finally here. Where is Dumbledore?" "Albus didn't come," McGonagall replied, her tone steady but firm. "What?" McGonagall's words left everyone visibly shocked. How could Dumbledore, of all people, not show up for such a critical matter? "I don't mean to underestimate you, Minerva, but this curse is really unusual," Amelia said cautiously, clearly misunderstanding. She thought Dumbledore had sent McGonagall to handle the curse. "I understand, Amelia," McGonagall replied with a calm nod. Then she gently pushed Ivan forward. "But please believe in the abilities of Hogwarts. This time, Albus has given full authority to this child to deal with the curse." "What? This time?" Not only Amelia but everyone present was stunned. Granted, they had met Ivan once before and knew he had an exceptional level of magical talent. Even in terms of raw power, there were whispers that the adult wizards present might not be able to match him. "Are you joking, Minerva?" Barty Crouch Sr. spoke seriously, his tone carrying a weight of disbelief. "No matter how talented this child is, he's still just a child." It was evident that the officials of the Ministry of Magic were skeptical about Ivan's ability to resolve the matter. After all, the Ministry's own curse-breaking division had worked tirelessly day and night, yet they had failed to make even the slightest progress in lifting the curse afflicting Fudge and Umbridge. Was it truly possible that a single boy could outperform the combined efforts of the entire Ministry of Magic? If Dumbledore had been the one standing here, there would be no doubt. Reputation carried immense weight, and the name of the world's greatest white wizard inspired confidence beyond question. But Ivan, he is really too young. "Don't underestimate this child," McGonagall said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. She didn't elaborate further but instead asked for the location of the ward where Fudge and Umbridge were being kept. "Follow me." Though there were still doubts in their minds, the ministry officials decided to let Ivan try. After all, they had exhausted all other options, and there was no harm in allowing one more attempt. With this thought, everyone surrounded McGonagall, Ivan, and the others as they entered a room enhanced with advanced protective spells. The interior was entirely white, giving the space a sterile, clinical feel. Instead of beds, two translucent containers resembling oversized petri dishes stood in the center of the room. Ivan stepped forward and peered inside, only to see two toads lying motionless in each of the containers, none other than Fudge and Umbridge in their cursed forms. TRRR, TRR. Croak, croak, PFF'd. Although Ivan maintained a calm and composed exterior, he was laughing inwardly. What a sight. Honestly, if not for appearances, I'd have let them stay like this for a few more days. Ivan had no love for Fudge, and as for Umbridge, his disdain for her was even deeper. These two guys are simply a cancer to the wizarding world. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. But why didn't Dumbledore come? Will it be really okay? Mr. Weasley still seemed a bit uneasy, but with McGonagall and Moody remaining silent, he had no choice but to place his trust in Ivan. "It's no big deal, just a small curse," Ivan said nonchalantly, as if he were describing something as trivial as eating or drinking water. His casual demeanor only deepened the embarrassment of the curse breakers present in the room. The incident with the cursed gold coins was still fresh in their minds. Back then, they had been completely stumped and could only seek Dumbledore's help. Ivan had accompanied the old headmaster at the time. However, on that occasion, Ivan hadn't displayed much of his strength. He had merely shown a single spell to prove that his magical skills were on par with, if not far superior to, their own. Now, Ivan had come alone. McGonagall and Snape seemed more like his chaperones, there to oversee the visit to the Ministry of Magic, while Ivan himself was clearly the one taking charge. This curse is quite clever, Ivan commented as he inspected it. Ordinary wizards really wouldn't be able to deal with it. The root of the problem lies in your magic power. In this context, magic power referred to the strength and depth of one's magical abilities. Hearing such an explanation from a first-year wizard felt ironic to say the least. A room full of elite adult wizards, trained professionals, was being schooled by a boy, and they couldn't help but question who among them was truly the experienced wizard. Of course, a little skill is needed. Ivan did not use a wand. Since he was here to demonstrate his power, he naturally aimed to present his strongest capabilities. First, Ivan waved his hand, and the culture tank containing Toad Fudge vanished into nothingness. This move left all the Ministry of Magic officials present utterly stunned. A vanishing spell. Silent and wandless vanishing spell. But, wasn't that an alchemical item? The item in question was an alchemical creation with considerable magical resistance, yet it had been effortlessly erased by Ivan. That alone was a display of magical prowess far beyond their comprehension. Croak. With the culture tank gone, Toad Fudge floated mid-air for a brief moment before Ivan pointed casually. The next moment, the toad began to twist and shift, morphing rapidly until Fudge fell to the ground with a resounding thud. What happened? Where is this place? Fudge looked bewildered and frightened, his memory frozen at the moment when he had been transformed into a toad. To him, it felt as though no time had passed at all. One moment he was a toad, and the next, he was standing here. Rufus. Barty. Amelia. Fudge scrambled to his feet, hastily tidying up his disheveled robes. He scanned the room, noticing everyone staring at him, and immediately demanded to know the situation. When Fudge learned that he had been cursed by a dark wizard and turned into a toad, his face turned an alarming shade of green with anger. Damn it! Damn dark wizard! Damn robber! Catch him! He must be caught and punished. Having lost so much face, Fudge could barely contain his fury. He wanted nothing more than to throw the perpetrator into Azkaban and have them subjected to a Dementor's kiss. Excuse me, Mr. Minister. Noticing that Fudge was losing control, Ivan quickly cast a calming spell over him and continued, I still need to remove the spell on Ms. Umbridge. Perhaps we can discuss other matters once she has been restored. What? Fudge, still fuming, finally noticed Ivan, the young wizard standing before him. His first instinct was to reprimand the boy for speaking so casually, but before he could, his colleagues quickly explained the situation to him. It was Ivan who had broken the vicious curse placed upon him, succeeding where all the curse breakers in the Ministry of Magic had failed. Fudge was so shocked that he could barely speak. What stunned him even more was Ivan's identity. He remembered Ivan coming with Dumbledore before. The young wizard was Dumbledore's favorite student and a successor that the headmaster had clearly placed great focus on training. This point was only further emphasized by the fact that Dumbledore, despite the gravity of the situation, had not come in person to lift Fudge's curse. Instead, he had entrusted the task entirely to a first-year wizard. This level of trust and responsibility spoke volumes about how much Dumbledore valued Ivan. Fudge's magical ability might have been average, but his political instincts were razor-sharp. Almost immediately, he recognized the underlying threat. Dumbledore sending Ivan here wasn't just to break the curse, it was also a move to elevate this boy's reputation. And who would be the most impacted by Ivan's rising status and influence? Obviously, Fudge himself, the current Minister of Magic. What terrified Fudge even more was that two successive failures, the cursed gold incident and the Gringotts debacle, would utterly destroy his reputation if they became widely known. Fudge was still preparing for re-election, and the idea of his name being dragged through the mud was utterly unacceptable. But before Fudge could voice his thoughts, the ministry officials around him interrupted his train of thought. Mr. Ambrosius, please, Scrimgeour said. Please remove the curse on Ms. Umbridge, added Amelia, the two high-ranking officials representing the Auror Office and the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Faced with their united front, Even Fudge had no choice but to step back. "Very well," Ivan said calmly, not sparing Fudge a glance. He repeated the same spellwork he had used earlier, and in a moment, Umbridge was restored to her original form. Oh, Merlin, how dreadful. That dark wizard. Am I okay? Who saved me? Thank you so much. Umbridge's affected, overly sweet voice, combined with her expression of exaggerated gratitude, nearly made Ivan gag on the breakfast he'd eaten earlier that day. It was utterly revolting. Ivan deeply regretted turning Umbridge back into her human form. The toad-like appearance suited her perfectly. In fact, whether she was in human form or not, this woman still resembled a giant pink toad. The matter has been resolved, and the curse breakers will need to handle the subsequent recovery efforts, Ivan said calmly. He understood the importance of a gradual approach, much like boiling a frog in warm water. Having now stepped onto the stage of the British wizarding world, Ivan knew there would be plenty of opportunities to make his mark in the future. Especially after these two incidents, the entire Ministry of Magic would undoubtedly come to recognize the presence of an extraordinary little wizard from Hogwarts. Ivan's immense magical power, his ability to effortlessly defeat trolls and dark wizards, and now his success in breaking a complex curse, all of it left an indelible impression. It was inevitable that the Ministry of Magic would think of Ivan whenever they faced problems beyond their abilities in the future. "Professors, shall we return?" Ivan didn't hesitate, turning to leave. McGonagall and Snape followed him without a word, and Amelia and the other officials didn't object. After all, a young wizard like Ivan should be focusing on his studies, not spending his time solving problems for adults. In their eyes, it was already embarrassing enough for the Ministry of Magic to rely on a child's help. But Fudge saw things differently. The Minister of Magic watched Ivan and the two professors depart. His expression was a mix of dark brooding, and he looked very ugly. After returning to Hogwarts from the Ministry of Magic, Ivan said goodbye to the two professors. The two still had to attend classes, and Ivan also needed to reunite with Harry, Hermione, and the others. Dumbledore said nothing. Dumbledore really believed in Ivan, which could be seen from the fact that he entrusted everything to Ivan. "Then I'll go back first, headmaster." "Go, Dumbledore. Also, although it's a bit late for me to say this now, but, little Ivan, I still hope you can enjoy your life at Hogwarts." Of course, Ivan never thought of leaving Hogwarts. If there is a place in the entire wizarding world that Ivan likes most, it is definitely this magic school. He has decided to treat this place as his home. And now is not the time for me to step onto the stage. Ivan has a clear plan for his own path. Not to mention himself, Hermione, and the others have not grown up yet. Therefore, there is no need to be so anxious about many things. Ivan still has plenty of time. The tacit understanding with Dumbledore made Ivan not need to explain too much. He knew that the old man could understand his thoughts. After the trip to the Ministry of Magic, Ivan's identity had been exposed to Moody and other high-level officials of the Ministry of Magic. No, it cannot be said that the high-level officials. In fact, most of the high-level officials, including the Minister of Magic, did not know the true situation of Ivan. Here we can see how much Ivan values the members of the Ministry of Magic. Compared with political status and management ability, Ivan cares more about the combat effectiveness of the wizards themselves. There is nothing he can do about it. What kind of internal affairs do wizards play? That is not what they should do. They all have magic, and they are still fighting for power and intrigue. Ivan doesn't know what to say to them. "Ivan, near the end of the semester, the exam is imminent." Hermione and Parvati borrowed Penelope's first-year notes and began to review seriously. The two girls have already helped Ivan to take a seat. Today is the last class of this semester, followed by the extremely tortuous exam week. The young wizards need to take written tests and interviews according to the requirements of the professors of each subject. Of course, these assessments are not difficult for Hermione and Parvati, who are top students. Needless to say, Ivan didn't even need to take the exam, and he was directly rated O, the highest. When Professor Snape asked you to go out just now, I was scared. Knowing that the dark wizard who invaded Gringotts was Ivan, Hermione was very worried. Fortunately, nothing happened. Before seeing Snape coming, the little witch even thought that Ivan had been exposed, and Snape came to inform him to run away quickly. Fortunately, this did not happen, because Ivan came back. What can happen to me? Ivan flicked his fingers at the little witch, and the latter covered her forehead in pain, with a displeased face. But it is indeed exposed. Ah. Hermione was startled and asked quickly, then what? Nothing. Ivan smiled slightly and said calmly, the Ministry of Magic is not as powerful as you think. In fact, it is not an exaggeration to say that the current Ministry of Magic is strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Listening to Ivan's disdain for the Ministry of Magic, Hermione once again felt Ivan's confidence now. Unlike Hermione in the original book, the little witch now has a very deep understanding of strength. Without sufficient military support, the Ministry of Magic is nothing. Just like last time, and this time. Ivan added, the curse that the Ministry of Magic cannot break needed to be solved by either me or the headmaster. Well, there are people who understand things in the Ministry of Magic. For example, Moody and Kingsley are very insightful. They see Ivan's strength and potential. The most important thing is that Ivan is not Voldemort, he has enough capacity. In addition to Ivan's background as the descendant of the eternal bloodline. He is a Gryffindor student at Hogwarts and a disciple of Dumbledore, with a good family background. They can't find any reason to refuse. They are all working for others, so they naturally hope that their boss is capable, not a fool like Fudge. On the other hand, after listening to Ivan's description of the trip to the Ministry of Magic, Hermione's eyes were filled with admiration for Ivan. They are obviously the same age, but the ability shown by Ivan is simply incomparable to them. No, it's not just the little market in Hogwarts. Even if you look at the entire magic world, it is estimated that there is no other wizard who can compare with Ivan. But there shouldn't be anything next. Ivan said. When the final exam is over, the professors will renovate the third floor and have a practical test for you. Ivan doesn't need to worry about this matter, the professors are free to arrange it. As for Ivan himself, the Battle of Gringotts was the test of his first year. Now that the test is completed and it ended perfectly, Ivan completely relaxed, and he has begun to plan how to spend the next summer vacation. However, Hermione did not envy Ivan's exemption from the test. The little witch's favorite thing is to take the test, which makes her feel extremely excited. The only bad thing is probably that Hermione cares too much about the results. In the next few days, Hermione let Ivan see what the term, crazy preparation for the test, is. Obviously, Ivan could be 100% sure that with the ability of the little witch, it was a sure thing to get an O in all subjects. But Hermione, who was born with a holy body for exams, could not relax at all. She was not nervous or worried though. The little witch had a good mentality. She liked exams, not the exam results. Of course, if she didn't get an O in all subjects, Hermione would still feel sad. In this way, the exam week passed in a flash. Without a doubt, she got full marks in all subjects. Parvati, on the other hand, failed to get an O evaluation due to a mistake in the spell interview. As for Harry, Ronald, and Neville, Harry's results were very good, and he could be in the top 5 even in the entire first year. With Ivan's guidance, Harry is definitely stronger than his counterpart in the original book. Especially in terms of combat ability. Ivan estimated that Harry now could beat the first-year Harry of the original book in seconds. Then there was Neville, whose progress was very obvious. In addition to getting an O in the herbology class, Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick also gave him good evaluations. Even Ronald didn't have to worry about being beaten by Mrs. Weasley when he took his transcript back because of Ivan's magic tutoring classes. The result of the final exam was a happy one for everyone. The trapdoor trial on the third floor was not only for Harry, Parvati, Ron, and Hermione, but also for students of all years under Ivan's suggestion. Of course, participation here required the permission of the professors. The professors would adjust the difficulty of the trial according to the year of the young wizards, except for the graduating 7th years. If it were the original trapdoor trial, the professors would definitely not have been able to control it. But now there was Ivan. After Ivan's transformation, the trapdoor trial had undergone a huge change. First of all, the level structure was no longer the original single-threaded format. Depending on the strength of the participant, there were different difficulties such as simple, difficult, and hell to choose from. Not only that, the magical creatures and magical plants that appeared in the trapdoor trial were all provided by Ivan. The professors refined and crafted these into various magical props and potions, using them as the bosses and rewards of the levels to increase the enthusiasm of the students. In addition, participation in the trapdoor trial was not mandatory. In fact, only the top 10 or so students in each year were qualified to take the test. If you couldn't even satisfy the professors with your performance in the final exam, then this kind of adventure, which carried a certain degree of danger, was even less likely to be allowed. For this type of assessment qualification, mindset was also crucial. Just like the original book's Neville, and many of the Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws, even if they met the requirements, if their mindset was not mature enough, the professors would not allow them to participate. The grand first Hogwarts trapdoor trial began. Because it was the first time, not many young wizards signed up. In addition to Ivan's friends, only Slytherin and Gryffindor students signed up in the first year. Unfortunately, except for a few first years such as Draco, none of them met the minimum requirements set by the professors. Even if they only participated in a simple trial, it was the same. The situation in the second and third years was similar to that in the first year. The main reason was that Hogwarts had been peaceful for too long, and the young wizards had too little experience in actual combat. This made many students hesitant to take part in any trial. Especially after watching the first-year students, including Hermione and others, pass the level, the enthusiasm for participation diminished. Yes, the broadcast of passing the level. This was another modification that Ivan made to the trapdoor trial. He set up warning magic and monitoring magic at various places in the trial. The former was to ensure the safety of the participants, and the latter captured the thrilling scenes of the young wizards as they passed through the levels. Among the first-year friends, the best performances were from Hermione and Harry. Hermione had mastered a variety of spells, while Harry was a genius in practical combat, showcasing incredible reaction speed and talent. The broadcast of the two passing through the levels amazed many young wizards, and even the older students were impressed. Although the professors repeatedly assured everyone that the participants in the trial would be adequately protected, at most sustaining minor injuries and never facing life-threatening danger, not everyone had the courage to face the monsters. This is just a first-year assessment. As the years progress, the levels that students have to face, even if they are considered simple, will make their heartbeats accelerate and fill them with great fear. After several months of teaching by Ivan, Penelope's magic level had greatly improved. She was fortunate to encounter a storm early on during her practice. The magic potion was successfully refined, and the subsequent transfiguration was naturally not a problem. With the help of Ivan's enchanted eye, the diligent student successfully completed the practice of Animagus transfiguration, which significantly improved her understanding of transfiguration. According to Ivan's calculations, Penelope's mental acuity must have improved with this achievement. And her resilience, surviving such a demanding test, was a great benefit to Penelope. Penelope's Animagus form was a delicate and small white dove. The senior student was quite satisfied with this result. Although the practice of Animagus transfiguration is primarily about improving one's adaptability to transfiguration, who would refuse to have a desirable animal form? The white dove, being a bird, possesses the ability to fly, which significantly enhances mobility. Moreover, the size of the dove is relatively small. If Penelope encounters danger in the future, she would only need to hide in a corner, and her chances of escape would increase dramatically. Whether in the Muggle world or the Wizarding world, few people would harm a dove. With its common characteristics, flying ability, and exquisite appearance, Penelope put considerable effort into fully mastering her Animagus form. Before the end of the semester, Penelope was almost always with Ivan. Ivan also invented several spells suited to her specific situation, including attack and defense spells, as well as several improved transfiguration spells. Ivan even analyzed the magical properties of her Animagus form. Based on the magical circuit in the Animagus transformation and Ivan's understanding of memory magic when casting without a wand, he successfully developed a method to engrave magic into the animal form. The only drawback was that this engraving could not include advanced spells, and the number of engravings was limited. Additionally, each engraved spell had a different cooldown period. With Penelope's current magical talent, she could choose up to 6 spells to solidify after transforming into her white dove form. She could use the Disillusionment Charm, the Shield Charm, the Bubble Head Charm, the Freezing Charm, and Apparition. Mind you, no one has ever managed to perform magic or cast a spell in their Animagus form. The engraving of these spells, even with Ivan's help, still took considerable time and energy. The Water and Fire Invulnerability Charms and the Freezing Charm were relatively simple and considered elementary spells. Although the Disillusionment Charm and the Shield Charm were more difficult, they were categorized as intermediate spells, barely touching the threshold of advanced magic. Even with Ivan's improvements and methods, if Penelope had relied solely on herself, it would have taken her several years to integrate these 2 spells with her white dove form. Fortunately, Ivan's magical control was extraordinary, allowing him to compress what would take years into just 1 month. Now, except for the most challenging apparition spell, Penelope's white dove form was no weaker than that of ordinary magical creatures. While its attack power might not be significant, the form provided her with numerous ways to ensure her survival. The Disillusionment Charm rendered her invisible, the Shield Charm provided resistance against various spells and physical attacks, and the Bubblehead Charm ensured her safety even if she fell into the water. The Freezing Charm was another vital addition. If she encountered a difficult dodge or a situation where her flight path was obstructed, she could cast the Freezing Charm to slow down the surrounding objects. This granted her enough reaction time to accurately avoid obstacles and escape through narrow gaps. If Penelope can also engrave the apparition spell in the future, then her Animagus transformation will truly become a magical skill. If you can't defeat an opponent, simply transform and find a place to hide. Apparition takes time, and there is a possibility of being hit by an anti-apparition spell. But after Ivan's research, he discovered that the apparition of an Animagus in animal form is somewhat different from that of human wizards. This means that most anti-apparition spells designed for wizards are ineffective against Animagus forms. Of course, this does not imply that each Animagus has a unique apparition method. If that were the case, anti-apparition wards would have a much harder time. In reality, this difference is more like a broad category. Simply put, after Animagi transform into animals, whether they become cats, dogs, birds, or insects, they are classified under a single system. The magic used by these transformed animals is collectively referred to as animal magic by Ivan. Currently, there are only 2 people at Hogwarts who have mastered animal magic. One is Professor McGonagall, and the other is Penelope. The older Animagus, Professor McGonagall, was intrigued when she heard about the animal magic developed by Ivan. She is an Animagus herself. So with Ivan's assistance, the risk of engraving spells was minimized. Combined with Professor McGonagall's own advanced magical expertise, the number of spells she could cast in her tabby cat form far exceeded Penelope's, reaching an impressive 10. Yes, 10. After transforming into a tabby cat, Professor McGonagall can engrave and use a total of 10 spells. This gives Professor McGonagall a significant amount of combat power even in her Animagus form as a cat. Fortunately, Professor McGonagall has a good nature. Otherwise, with this ability, she could potentially take advantage of someone like Voldemort's momentary inattention and defeat him outright in a sneak attack. Amazing. Wow, Prefect Clearwater is really a talent among talents. She really passed with elegance too. Penelope completed the 5th year test at Hell difficulty. At this moment, in the Hogwarts Great Hall, bubble-like projections floated above the heads of the students. Today's trial was being displayed within these magical projections. There weren't many students at Hogwarts, 7 years in total, with a limited number of participants overall. According to the arrangements made by Ivan and the professors, the trial lasted for 6 days, with students from 1st to 6th year taking the test on separate days. Because the difficulty levels varied, senior students could know the content of the levels in advance and have some preparation time. For example, Penelope, who had just completed the 5th year test. The senior chose the Hell difficulty trial for her year. She did not disappoint, demonstrating the results of Ivan's guidance during this period. Compared to herself a few months ago, Penelope's current magical abilities had improved so much that she could easily surpass her past self. Even if Penelope were to take the 6th-year test, she could pass at the difficult level without issue. Additionally, to make the students of Hogwarts feel more engaged, Ivan specially invented this projection magic. Hearing the various excited or envious shouts in the hall, Ivan knew that this final challenge-style trial would become one of the 10 new signature activities of Hogwarts. This is much more meaningful than the often meaningless House Cup. Professors such as McGonagall, Flitwick, and Sprout were initially a little worried, but the results of the trial exceeded expectations. They had to admit one thing: they were indeed a little behind the times. The tradition of the House Cup has continued for thousands of years, and its existence will naturally persist. But this does not mean that Hogwarts cannot introduce new and exciting innovations. The final exam was a very successful experiment. In 5 days, many young wizards and witches showcased their extraordinary talents through the projected trials. Envy, admiration, and jealousy arose as these students stood out, gaining popularity and becoming the focus of their respective houses. As for those who were eliminated, Ivan ensured they received consolation prizes. Regardless of the results, as long as they had the courage to step forward and participate, even if they didn't pass a single level, they were still worthy of praise. And this is only the beginning. Next year, Ivan plans to make the final exam even better. The young wizards, having gained experience, will undoubtedly perform better. Next time, they won't be so easily thrown out of the levels without achieving anything. No one wants to lose face, everyone hopes to be the one who stands out. Ivan's goal is to establish a competitive ladder at Hogwarts. This way, it becomes immediately clear who is stronger, who is weaker, and who excels overall. Congratulations! Ivan and his friends were sitting in a corner of the Great Hall. When he saw Penelope approaching, he immediately congratulated her. Not to mention the various admirations of Hermione, Parvati, and the others, Penelope was eager to hear Ivan's evaluation. "How do you feel?" "Not bad." Penelope was unscathed. With her strength, passing the 5th-year Hell level assessment was relatively easy. The only question was whether her performance was impressive enough. Clearly, Penelope's performance had been extraordinary. Her confident demeanor, as though she were strolling through a garden, and the commanding display of power as she smashed the guardian golem with a spell, made it no exaggeration to say that Penelope was the most capable witch among the students at Hogwarts. "I feel like I should participate in the 6th-year trial." Penelope spoke honestly. She knew Ivan well enough now to understand that he wasn't a leader people would shy away from. Ivan was the kind of person who naturally drew others to him just by being present. As a result, in less formal situations, the relationship between Penelope and Ivan had grown increasingly close, resembling that of a boss and a personal secretary. "There will be a chance next year." Ivan smiled and said, "Or do you need me to prepare a special test for you?" However, Penelope felt a little embarrassed. "Prefect Penelope, you are so amazing," Hermione said as she approached, looking at Penelope with envy. "Hermione, your performance was also very good," Penelope replied. Penelope had watched the projection of Hermione and the others on the first day. Although they were still very immature, their performance was equally remarkable. It was hard to believe that a group of first-year students could achieve what they did. The magic they had mastered, their understanding of spells, and their decisiveness and courage in critical moments put many older students to shame. If those older students had been placed in the same positions as Hermione and Harry, even at their current age, they would likely struggle to match their abilities. This realization was somewhat humiliating. It can be expected that once the trial projections become widely discussed, many determined and competitive students will rise at Hogwarts in the future. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.